This is Stephen Pearson. It says a police constable who was stabbed in Castle Street on the September the 10th, 1891, and he died in 1892, June the 18th. It took him almost a year to die. But what had happened, a man called Peter Byrne, who wasn't from Sheffield, who was just visiting, struck him with a knife that cut right through his helmet, right from his ear then to his chin, a tremendous gash right down to the cheekbone. But it took him almost a year to die from his wounds. I believe that this is the grave of George Partington. It did have a helmet of the Light Brigade and also a plaque which has obviously been taken off, whether for security reasons or theft. But he rode originally with the Heavy Brigade, but he's also followed the Light Brigade into the Valley of Death in 1854. He was wounded by a Cossack, and then he was also nursed by Florence Nightingale of all people. He rode at Balaclava, Inkerman, the siege of Sebastopol. He was thrown from his horse and trap one day and he died. Simple as that. Amongst this lot, I'm looking for really a Thomas Lawley Ternan. Now he's not famous, but his sister is. She was the mistress of Charles Dickens, and it appears that it's amongst probably some of those gravestones that are covered in vines, but he's not in this junction somewhere amongst here, and it's a bit wet. The grave of Mark Firth. Now anybody who knows Sheffield will know that that's one of the famous steel owners. Became famous for Firth Browns, where the Don Valley stadium is all around in the East End. Firth's had that's buried with his wife Caroline. Of course he died in 1880, but the name Firth means a great deal in Sheffield, I mean, especially amongst steel production. Looking for that Thomas Lawler Ternan amongst all this lot. I don't seem to be able to find him, but he's evidently around this area. This is interesting. The memory of George, the son of Scammerdine and Harriet Carr. Then Scammerdine Carr. What a name, eh? So where did he get that from? Reverend Charles Larham. Now you're coming to some of the more richer Victorians here in Sheffield, and this is what we call the Acropolis. So you're interned in there. It's obviously all locked up. People have tried to get in thinking that there's some money in there. This is an interesting one. Leopold Lichtenthal of St. Petersburg. He came here to escape cholera in Russia, but he thought that he was a horseman. The horse panicked, his spurs got caught, and he was knocked unconscious. 10 days later he died at the age of 17. This is another view of the Acropolis, and that statue on the right is of an alderman who was well thought of, but nobody's now ever heard of. Somewhere amongst this undergrowth, the trouble is you get saturated, is the grave of Francis Dickinson, who survived the charge of the Light Brigade. It's part of the 17th Lancers. All I know is that there's the main entrance in the distance, there's a path, and just round here is his grave. but it's not marked and I can't see it, but it is here. Well, here's a final look through the Victorian Cemetery in Sheffield on Cemetery Road, and you get monoliths like this. Now it's a beautiful park now. Not far from the city centre. We've been for a walk up on the top, but this is where it ends, I'm afraid. We're right back to where we started with Thomas Sands, the guy who served at the Battle of Waterloo, and he's right by. This is not the main entrance, but the little play park. We're in Burngreave Cemetery in Sheffield, but this is the grave of the famous Fatty Fulks, William Henry Fulks, 25 stone, played for Sheffield United in England, and when Chelsea was formed in 1905 they signed him and it put another 10,000 on their gate. The folks just wanted to see him. He got paid £3 per match during the close season. He'd go to Blackpool and beat the goalie, but he turned to drink when his career ended, and he died of cirrhosis of the liver in May of 1916, aged just 42 years. How sad. But of course he's buried with his wife Beatrice. This is Christ Church in Attercliffe. Of course the church doesn't exist anymore because it was bombed in 1943. But this is where Ellen McCarthy, John Henry's second daughter, was married to Douglas Elliot, my grandparents, in 1928. This is at the junction of Worksop Road and Attercliffe Road. There's some little sad epitaphs here amongst these. Joseph and Mary Marsh, who outlived their 7 children. Henry Palmer, schoolmaster, organist and choirmaster, died in 1872, aged 41. Obviously they thought a lot of him, but there's something missing off the plinth at the top. The original church lay, and just at the back of that, it's all embankment now, but back in 1882 it was all built up and the River Dons was changed direction, but there was the original cliff that's mentioned in the Domesday Book. This is why this area is called At the Cliff or Attercliffe. They can just see through the trees the international school, because back in the 1800s there was a lot of individuals came from all over the world to work in engineering and steel making here. But you won't find many above the age of 65, and there's lots of children here, especially cholera victims because of the deprivation that existed in the East End of Sheffield in the late 19th century, earlier 20th century. Back of Christ Church, this is Little Zion Lane. There was a little Jewish quarter as well, and this is where my father was born, 1924. Probably not see it at the moment. When you are here and you look closely, you can see, for example, little tracks here of where the horse and cart has worn the cobbles away. You can see it more here, the wear and tear from horse carts that have come down here. And of course this here on the left is a little Jewish school. There was here a congregational church that got demolished. I can't remember what, the 1960s and 1970s. But the little Jewish school still exists. Zion's Sabbath School. Not that my father was Jewish, but nonetheless. and this is what Attercliffe used to be like.